Hello, guys. Welcome to another Sharpening Report. This is Jake Rahutsky for Josh Peck. I've got with me tonight John Pounders from Now You See TV as a co-host. John, really excited to have you with me tonight, man.
Yeah, Jake, man, it's a blessing to be able to be on here. Me and you have been friends for a long time. This is really cool that you're hosting Josh's show. I know we've had Josh on before. You're also doing big things with Skywatch right now. So this is awesome, man. This is a blessing, and we have Tim on tonight, which is, to me, that's amazing because I love the documentary. The first time I ever even heard of Tim was through Rude Awakening. I think Michael Rude was talking with him on a show, and I'm like, I got to check this documentary out. It happened to be on Netflix. I watched it, and it's by far the best and most just the best explained version of what happened to the Israelites when they were there in history. Man, it just made so much sense. So I'm excited about this. There's no doubt.
So, yes, Tim, thank you for joining us. Tim, if you guys don't know, Tim Mahoney, he's the director and producer of Patterns of Evidence, basically for Exodus, basically the events of ancient Israel, like all the things that happened there. And so we're going to talk about this documentary tonight and Tim's findings. So thank you for joining us, Tim.
Hey, it's really great to be here, guys. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, honored, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so I'm glad you're finally able to get you in a slot here. So, Tim, why don't you let's just start kind of from the beginning with this. Like, what prompted all of this for you to want to dig into the evidence behind this? Did you know some skeptics that didn't believe what happened, or what happened there?
You know, in the very beginning, it was I'm a filmmaker, and I made lots of TV commercials, but I always knew that I wanted to make films. And I always knew that I was wanting to make films about the Bible. I grew up in a family where my mother and father, it was a Christian home, but it was a broken home. And eventually, my mother and myself, I was the oldest child. I had two sisters and a brother. We ended up having to leave, and my mother had family devotion. So, meaning leaving, we had to leave. The family broke up. And we actually had to leave my father. And I remember many times when my mother was praying and reading the Bible at night, we had what was called family devotions. So this rock in our family, which was the Bible and the Bible stories, I grew up with that as part of my heritage. And so, but as I grew older, as I've shared with different people, you know, as you grow up, people challenge those stories. And people don't believe in them. It wasn't really that I didn't believe, but it wasn't until I actually started to, as a filmmaker, to investigate this when I went to Egypt and was confronted with archaeologists who said there wasn't any evidence for this, that's when my faith started to be challenged, because intellectually they were saying they couldn't find any evidence for it, and emotionally I was, was really conflicted by that.
Awesome. Okay, so this is kind of what opened up the door for you. So what was the next step in that process?
Well, after I came back, I was looking at this footage on a Saturday, because I had to work. I didn't just become a filmmaker. I had to do a lot of things before that. And I think for a lot of your audience, they might be things they feel like they're called to do. And, you just have to keep working at it. Sometimes it's not your primary job. And for me, I was making a lot of commercials. Before I made commercials, by the way, I worked in the automotive industry, painting cars. That was our family's industry. So I've had a long journey of doing things that were difficult to try to get to the things I wanted to do. And as I was working on this, looking at this footage on a Saturday, I was watching this footage of this archaeologist who told me there wasn't any evidence. And this was Dr. Manfred Bitek. And at that moment, this cold chill, in a sense, came over me, and this thought entered my mind. Maybe everything that you've been told, that your mother believed, your family has believed, is a lie. And I could just feel, it was almost at a place, and I wonder how many people have come to that and have just sort of walked away from their faith. And I think that that's not an uncommon maybe occurrence for people. And it might happen because of some kind of tragedy in their family or something, and they just struggle with their faith. And for me, at that moment, another thought came into me. It was very clear that I should get up and go to my office. And someone had given me a book a year and a half earlier that I never read. And I went to my office, and it was almost like I was, sort of guided to that book. I pulled it out, and there, when I opened it up, was the very location that I was looking at, editing, was referenced in this book, and it was written by Egyptologist David Roll. And that became a breakthrough. At that moment, I said, I have to meet this man. And we found him, and I went to England, and I interviewed him. And he told me a completely different story about what was happening at that dig site. And that was really the beginning of an understanding that there was something different going on here, that people weren't recognizing the evidence for the Bible because it was at the wrong time period. And so, yeah, they would say, yeah, this must be where the legend of the Exodus came from, but this isn't the true event.
I do have a question real quick. And by the way, I'm John, and I think Jake introduced us earlier. I wanted to ask a question about this. Why have people placed the Hebrews being in Egypt during the time period that is the most popular? What steamed that whole thing without any evidence? Why would they place it during that time? And I think you answered that in the documentary because of a scripture there. And because most people would say, well, in the Bible, it tells you about the king, during this time. And so why do people believe it? Because, I mean, obviously, when you look at it, you would think that. But I know you explained it pretty well in your documentary. I want to give you a chance to explain it to people that haven't seen it yet. I just want people to know this. If you have Netflix, you can go watch it for free tonight, and it's awesome. So make sure you do so.
Yeah. What you can do is I think it's Exodus, the first chapter, verse 11. It says that the children of Israel were building the cities of Ramesses and Pithom. These are two cities in Egypt that they're very well known. And when archaeologists have dug those cities, they haven't found any evidence for a large amount of Semitic people being there, their multiplication, their enslavement, or the judgment of Egypt. It's a really prosperous time. And but underneath the city, in the area, at an earlier time. So if we have a time here, then Ramesses was here. Underneath this, down here below, is another time period. And that's what this man for BTEC was telling us, that this time period, he couldn't see any connection, but this is where the story was matching perfectly. So this lower time period, and so what people have said is, it's not the time of Ramesses, but the location of Ramesses. So, but if this city was gone, the only way they would know it was by calling it this location. So hundreds of years or later, they would have called it that, because no one would have known where it was, because this idea was gone. The same thing is true in Minnesota here, where I'm from. The city of St. Paul is the capital, but it wasn't called St. Paul in the very beginning. It was called Pig's Eye. And eventually they built a cathedral, and its name changed. So what we know is that over time, locations, place names change. And what we believe and what people would say is that they were telling us the location, but not the time period. And that's what the film is uncovering, is that earlier in Egyptians' time, the complexity of this is that Egypt's timeline, all these Bible events are showing up over here, and everyone thinks they're supposed to be over here. So we've got this section over here where we see all this Bible stuff, and over here is where they think it's supposed to be. Because it's not here, they dismiss all of this. That's why the film is called Patterns of Evidence.
And I think that's really interesting to note, because most people that I've talked to, they're like, well, the Bible says who it was. I'm like, no, it really doesn't. It just says, like you said, this is the area of Ramses. It doesn't say he was the king at the time. It doesn't say anything. But I think in the documentary, and Jake, I'm sorry if I haven't.
No, go ahead.
I am. I talk a lot, but there was two really strong opinions, and one of them was that Egypt history is easy to identify. The other one that it's like trying to piece together a million fragments and you're missing half of them. And I wanted to get your take on that, because Egyptian history seems to be, according to the documentary that I saw, or that you did, seems to be very fragmented and very hard to follow. But it looks like, at least according to what I saw, is that still your opinion, or how did that how did that play out through the whole thing? Because you obviously had the two different opinions.
Yes, I think that what we're going to show actually in upcoming films is we're going to explain this even more. What you're raising is that what do we know about ancient history is really piecing together these fragments, and but Egypt has more fragments than all the other cultures. So that's why Egypt is the nation that sets the gold standard for dating. And so, when I began this, let's say 14 or so years ago, I didn't know any of this. And as I became involved with it over and over, we started to get an education. And what I will tell you is that if they come up with a new discovery, they've only discovered a small amount of what's been buried or what might be out there. And there's a lot of stuff that's been dug up that that no one's had the time. There's probably several hundred years of artifacts that have to be defined what they are, and that might shed light on a lot of history too. So what we're saying is that I went to Oxford, and there's a very there's a very famous Egyptologist who basically said what we have is rags and tatters. What we know about Egypt, we're continuing to learn. I think he was, when he probably wrote that, he was frustrated. He was just realizing that there's so much that we don't know. So what we're suggesting is, from a scientific standpoint, is what are the major patterns that you would be looking for in the Bible story? The arrival, the multiplication, the enslavement of the Israelites, the judgment of Egypt, the exodus out of Egypt, and the conquest of the Promised Land. So in 1,000 years of Egyptian history, when we took the approach for how can we uncover where that might be, the pattern shows up in what's called the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. And that's where many people see that all the connections are. And not only that, but they show up in the land of Canaan as well. And so this is a very controversial point of view, but there's a lot more supporting evidence for it that we actually will share with you in the future. So I think there's really something that is coming up here. There's a professor or a Bible scholar, apologist by the name of Dr. Norman Geisler, and he's been very supportive of the film. And he said that patterns are more important than dating, because the dating is really a kind of a guess as to what they have so far. And I don't think the dating is as stable, and the patterns are more important.
So, Tim, quick question for you. What about the documentation trail of local historians and the like, outside of the extra biblical text? Do those not hold substantial weight? And what did you guys find along those lines, if anything?
Well, let's go back to how Egypt was dated. The Bible was used in the very beginning to synchronize dating. There was a pharaoh called Shishak in the Bible, and a pharaoh called Shoshank. And when Champollion, who deciphered the Rosetta Stone, is your audience familiar with the Rosetta Stone, was found in the early 1800s, late 1700s. And this Rosetta Stone had 3 forms of writing on it. And it was what broke the code for deciphering the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So there was 2 forms of Egyptian writing, demotic and hieroglyphics. So hieroglyphics is, the symbols, and demotic is some type of an Egyptian script. And then they had Greek. It took about 6 years for that to be figured out, but they had a basic, rudimental understanding of hieroglyphs. And when Champollion went to Egypt, he was testing out his new knowledge, and this will be coming up in another film. He ended up seeing a connection to Jerusalem and to this pharaoh, and he thought maybe this pharaoh was the pharaoh of the Bible. And sort of in a sort of over time, that sort of became a place where they found a place to synchronize. These 2 events just kind of synchronized like that. And from that point on, they built Egyptian history around it. And what people like David Roll and John Bimson and others are saying is that that synchronism, if you start looking at it, his interpretation was wrong. And it wasn't the same campaign. But no one ever bothered to change anything. And so that's the reason why everyone says, well, scholars have all proved this. Well, if you say, well, they've sort of proved that the chronology is correct, you'd have to then say, well, what other events are there that they've synchronized it with? And I haven't gotten any solid answers for that, from anyone, because everyone's sort of taking it as face value because they inherited it. And so what we're seeing is that there is something amiss here. By the way, the 104th Psalm, almost word for word, appears 200 years earlier as well. And when I heard that, that was when I realized that I couldn't just make a film that was generic. I had to deal with this question of the dating. And also, characters like Jonathan and Saul show up in Israel's history several hundred years earlier as well. And what people say is this is where the legend of Saul and Jonathan come from, because they can't reconcile the fact that maybe the dating might be off.
Interesting. And so there's you talked about so many different things in this documentary about what was wrong with this dating system. And most people who would have no idea, and you're right. I mean, a lot of people that actually do look into these kind of subjects could easily be turned away from believing the Bible to be true and factual. I'm a person that's a Bible literalist. I believe that the Bible is literal, and everything about it, especially when it comes to history, is 100% literal. And so somebody like me that might come along and say, hey, this is this, but then you find out in history it doesn't show that that's a possibility. What are the things that caused you to believe that it was not during the time period that everybody thinks it is? What made it a definite opinion of yours? Because I know you talked about some of the stuff you saw, but what's the deciding factor? Because a lot of people might see a little bit of evidence and they're like, well, there's a little bit, and I'm going to move on from this subject. Yeah. Obviously, you took it pretty deep. Yeah,
I think that here's the premise. I grew up, I think, as a person that believed that the Bible was, it was historical, and I still believe that it's historical. The challenge came when we started realizing that people said, well, there's no evidence for it here at this particular time. David Rowland, John Bimson, and others like him basically started to say, but there is amazing evidence for the Bible. Almost every piece. In fact, my criticism has been to me and to others that have believed in this, that it's too good. Your evidence is too good. In other words, you're showing evidence for everything. And, well, you can't plant that evidence in the ground. So if we're going back to the question is what caused me, I think that when I knew that all this evidence was earlier, and there's some ways that people can explain that. But when I realized that this 104th Psalm was earlier and that Jonathan and Saul were earlier as well, that's when I said, we're not going to, not talk about this. We have to talk about this now. And when we get to the other material, we'll show you. And when you start to look at the big picture, because the great thing about being a filmmaker is that I'm not on the inner circle with a bunch of things I'm trying to hold up, you see. I can actually step back from this just like you can, both of you guys can and your audience can, and actually take a fresh look at everything. And what we end up seeing is an amazing pattern of evidence. And the other thing I'll point out was that I think that people oftentimes will grab one idea and they'll build their whole theory around one idea. Well, it gets much more complex if you take 6 major points and have to line them all up. The probability of that is very huge. And not only that, but they have to have the right spacing. In other words, you have to have, because we know there's certain time gaps and all that. So the very fact that Egypt collapses at the end of this Middle Kingdom, and so does the land of Canaan, that there's a period that actually changes the way archaeologists see history, that they change in 1,000 years. There's one place where Egypt collapses, and I believe that that was during the time of the Exodus, the judgment. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but did you know that the plagues of the Exodus, if this is a type and shadow as the Bible talks about, are actually repeated in the book of Revelation?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I do agree that I think prophecy and things that happen in the scripture are cyclical. The Bible states that there's nothing new underneath the sun. And you're right, it is an exact literal plague of these different things. Maybe it seems like it's in a different kind of way, but exactly the same order. And I don't. Then this leads to a question that I kind of have to ask now. Are each of these plagues in your study of Egyptology, your study of the Egyptian gods, and everything that you had to study probably to bring yourself to this circle, are these plagues? Because you hear me, and excuse me for a second, but you hear people talking about each plague represents a god of Egypt, that God was basically spitting in each one of them's face through each one of these plagues. In your study, is that true, or is this just just something you hear in Sunday school?
I've heard that. I've heard that from different people, and I have not spent much time in analyzing that. We have a research room where we collect all sorts of material, and at the particular time, I don't have an answer for you for that. I'm open-minded to that. And part of the way patterns of evidence approach is okay, build your case for why this would be God doing this against the different gods of Egypt. But I would also say is that I think there is a connection to the fact that God was showing that he was God over all, that he was God over the Nile, he was God over the insects. He was a god over the sky and over the rain and cloud, and hail and fire, and he was God of creation. And I think obviously if you go to Egypt, you see that they've turned all sorts of things into demigods or whatever, so that and Pharaoh believed that he was a god. So yes, I think that there was basically a lesson that was being demonstrated, that all these things that you think you could put your trust in, even cattle, like the Apis bull, there's a cult of cattle worship, and you'll see that on the sides of Egyptian temples, this worship of cattle and worship of just about everything, right? And so I think that you could build a case that there's a connection there, that God was basically demonstrating that he was God over all.
So real quick, Tim, for the viewers and for my understanding too, so how far off was the timeline from the mainstream understanding of these events? Like what was the spread?
It's about 200 years.
Okay.
And I probably can't see it in this. I have a book here. See if I can see it. But you see this dark section over here?
Yes.
Right up here. Let's see, right there. This dark section here these dark sections are called intermediate periods, and basically what he's saying, Egyptologists are saying, is that that dark section is overinflated. Is that what they ended up doing was there was Upper Nile, there's an Upper Nile, and there's a Lower Nile, and they had different kingdoms, and they were putting those pharaohs end to end to end to end, and sometimes they were overlapping. It's kind of like a president of the South and the president of the North. They weren't like this; they were like this. And so the question is that what people believe is that they extended these end to end, and that made this number longer when there was overlapping that was going on.
So one other thing, Tim, I'd just like to ask, because I know biblical scholars use typically genealogy they'll use genealogy as a timeline to paint the picture of, say, like the genealogy of Jesus from basically the lineage of David and even before. How does this affect that in anywhere? Does it?
It doesn't have anything to do with that, because in the film, the Wall of Time was a great device. Originally, I had it as a tower because of the archaeology being up, building upon itself in layers. But we ended up making it a wall, which I think is a much superior idea. And there are different levels to the wall. So Egypt has a lower timeline. The Bible is, on top. The Bible is the next timeline. So here's Egypt's timeline. Here's the Bible's timeline. And then on top of that is Canaan's timeline. So you can see these timelines side by side. And what historians are trying to figure out is, where does time sort of synchronize, And so remember I told you about Champollion and that wall at Karnak, where he basically saw the connection between those two pharaohs. So he came along and he goes, oh, I think that there's a connection right here. But he basically got those two pharaohs wrong. I mean, the campaigns aren't the same. And that's what we'll talk about in the future. And I think that's a very important connection to see that isn't a connection. In other words, it's an important truth to understand. And what's happened is that no one's really gone back until recently here and made a film that you can understand this. And that's basically what Patterns of Evidence is doing. It's basically saying, okay, if we want to be truly scientific, right now everyone's saying the Bible is a myth in the archaeology world because there's no evidence at the time they're suggesting it. And what we're basically doing is saying, yeah, but there's a pile of evidence that matches in sequence earlier. And then the question is why? And there's, okay, well, either the events happened earlier, it's just a coincidence, or there are other factors like, could it be that Egypt's timeline is off? And I think that the latter is what basically is happening. And that raises other questions, but we're going to get more. I think as we go along, we're going to show that there are amazing patterns of evidence that match all of this. And then the question is why?
Okay, so another viewer tonight has a question. Caught asks, he says, I wonder if Tim thinks or has come to the evidence of Egyptologists, archaeologists, or others that are intentionally trying to hide information so that they can discredit the Bible. Comment on that, if you would, Tim.
I don't necessarily think that is the case. And when I first started, I thought that might have been the case. But no, I think what it is, though, is I think there is obviously now, there is a huge political correctness that for the last, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years, that you aren't allowed, or you could lose your job if you started making suggestions that the Bible might be a historical document or there might be evidence for it. Number two, I have archaeologists on camera that have said, oh, we see stuff from the Bible all the time. And we talk about it privately, but we know we can't talk about it publicly or else we'll be in trouble with, they'll be in trouble with the system, with the group. So there is a bias. There's absolutely a bias against the Bible. And the question is, they came to that bias because their teachers came to a point where everyone started saying there's no evidence for this, and if you think there is, then you're just religious and you're not being intellectual. And now here we are saying to the people, wait a minute, there's a pattern here, and because you're denying it, you're not being intellectual. You're being almost religious about the fact that you can't accept that there's any evidence for it. So it's almost twisted itself. You get what I'm saying? The people that don't want there to be any evidence almost. So the question is there a bias against it? I think there's a bias to even allow the Bible to come back into play. But I think because they believe that the Exodus had to happen at another period of time, they feel intellectually honest that there's no evidence for it. But they're not going to look anymore. So I think that's where the dishonesty comes in, where they, where they don't want to basically look anymore for this.
Yeah, quick. Sorry, one more thing. I just wanted to ask him. I guess you're aware of the Qumran excavation that they're going to be doing here, starting at the end of 2016 in Israel. In this 10th cave in Qumran with Dr. Randall. Are you involved in any way in that project?
Currently, I actually had a great pleasure of meeting with him at a conference just recently at the Prophecy Conference, the Prophecy Watchers, and we talked about that, and he's on my list to call. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get there, but I'm tempted to talk about the possibility of being there and being with him. But it's unofficial, and we haven't talked at all. But whenever something like that is happening, it would be great to be a part of something like that. So I'm very excited about what he's doing.
Awesome. I just wanted to plug real quick, guys. We interviewed Aaron Judkins the other night. He is a member of the team, and he's going on fundraiser.com, fundrazr.com. You can look up Dead Sea Scrolls and support him to help him get there, because obviously this is cost out of his pocket to be involved, but it is going to be a huge, this could be a huge biblical history, correct, Tim?
Yeah, when you're opening a cave like that, who knows what they're going to be able to find. And, I find it interesting that these connections are being made at this time in history, where people are having an opportunity to see some things that maybe has been kept quiet for such a long time. And maybe it was early in years past, people didn't need it, but now as things continue to expand, it feels as if you know, more and more people might need to have some of this information that they've never had before.
Okay, John, I know you were itching for a question. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I was just going to, and this is really, it was kind of applied to the last thing you had, so it kind of got answered. But what I guess one of the most insightful and amazing things that I saw in this documentary that just kind of got me excited, it was really cool. But when the evidence that you did find for the time period that I think they were there, you know, after watching that documentary, I'm like, this has got to be the time period. You found grave sites, and you found one in particular of somebody very important to that time period that you think is his grave site. Can you talk a little bit about that for our audience, because this is something they need to hear. This will get, I mean, you guys, I know all you guys listening right now are going to go watch the documentary tonight if you haven't seen it. I know that already, but this is something that'll make you want to watch it even more, because this is one of the most amazing finds in the documentary, in my opinion. Do you know what I'm talking about, correct? I'm sure.
Yeah, I think you're referring to, you see, what was amazing about this location, this area in Eastern Delta is called Avaris, the ancient city of Avaris. And what they found is this small group of people came in with permission from the Pharaoh. In other words, they were allowed to be there. And they found a settlement that grew. And in the settlement, there was a palace. And in the back of that palace was a cemetery. And it had principal tombs, but it also had one very special tomb, which was a pyramid tomb. But what was amazing to the archaeologists was that the person who was inside this pyramid tomb was not an Egyptian. He was a Semitic type person. And they had a statue of him. And he had like his arm was here, and he had like a throw stick, which meant he was a man of authority. And he had a multicolored type coat. But what was amazing was he had reddish hair and this light colored skin, the way his face was. He wasn't painted like an Egyptian. So they knew that what they had was a Semitic type person who was a ruler with reddish hair that had been given a pyramid tomb. And what I learned was that only pharaohs and queens had pyramid tombs. I don't think they've ever seen anyone else with a pyramid tomb. And when they dug into the graves area, well, I should tell you that around this pyramid tomb were 11 other principal tombs. There are other graves there because it was a graveyard, but they had these other types of tombs. So it matches the story of Joseph and his brothers. And when they opened the graves, they found that these people were buried on their sides, not like Egyptians like this, but they were buried in a fetal position on their sides. And they had weapons and daggers, and they were buried with donkeys, I think, and goats, and they knew that this group of people that came in were very prosperous, and they had a family or some type of a small group that came in. And when they got to the tomb of this pyramid tomb and they dug into it, what they found out was that it had been broken into, and that the bones were missing. And I found that, that connection there, matching the story, that there was this family or this community that was there. They had these number of tombs that matched the story, and that one principal tomb, and that the bones were missing, matching the story of Joseph telling his brothers that in the future, when you return to the land, because he knew the promise from Abraham, that in the future that they would return to the promised land, I want you to bring my bones out with you. And if the Bible says that that's what they did, they went and dug into his tomb and took his bones and brought him with them. And so I think that's a very powerful, amazing story of, I think it's a great faith builder to know that the very specifics of that story have been found now in archaeology.
This kind of begs the question, did they find any other evidence of a mass burial of slaves in that area? Because obviously you looked at, and I'll let you explain it, because I mean, it's just really cool the way you've looked into this subject.
I think, yeah, it's a good question. And what we find is that, the Bible says there's a lot of Semitic type people. There was a there were burials in the area. There was more. Well, when we talk about the Exodus, they found out that there were more women than men. That the male population was less than the women population. During that particular time, and we know that there was a culling of the male children during the time of Moses, and so they were seeing that this population had gone from being very prosperous to is hardship, and they were dying at an early age, and that the graves were different, that there were more women than men. So a lot of these things were showing up in this that matched the story in the archaeology. And so when they left this particular area, there was one other area in this, I think in the south of Egypt, which was called Cahoon, which had a very similar abandonment. All of a sudden, the whole town just left, almost like overnight. And Egyptologists have wondered, well, what happened? And it looks like these have happened at the same time. Now there are other cities or areas like Avaris in the Delta, but they've never gotten around to digging them up. So they don't know what happened at that. But looked like there was a massive plagues that came through this area at the time when these people left, and that there were bodies thrown into these graves. And so we're talking about two different graves periods now. One was from the time of Joseph when he died, and then all the way over to the time of the Exodus, where there was other sort of shallow graves where people just left. So the beginning of the story is about finding bodies. At the very end of it, it's finding bodies that look like they died of a plague. Hopefully that was somewhat coherent, but that's basically what they found at this city.
Very interesting. And you were talking to one guy that is, I guess he was, it's been almost a year since I've seen this documentary, but he was an Egyptologist, and he completely denies the idea that this is a possibility. And I think his reasoning, almost every reasoning that he had was really kind of ridiculous in my opinion. But obviously he's a smart guy. I'm not, trying to call him out or say he's an idiot or anything like that. But he completely and I think the original question from Cott, almost led me to believe when I'm thinking about this guy that he completely ignores this evidence. And for what reason, I'm not sure. But there's a lot of evidence you presented to him. Such as, and I can't remember every bit of it, but, and I know you obviously can because you did the documentary, but you presented with this evidence. And he's like, no, that couldn't be possible.
Well, I think that, yeah, I know you're referring to, I believe, there was a document that was written called the Ippur Papyrus, or the Admonitions of an Egyptian Sage. And that document is a document that I was talking with this person about, and in Holland. And I think the challenge is, once again, if you have a belief system that the Exodus had to happen at a particular time in history, over here, and we're saying that there's evidence for it over here, you can't connect the two. You're basically saying your paradigm is that it's not related. And so this is a hard pill for anybody who's been schooled that this is the way. It's sort of like moving from a flat earth to a round earth, or whatever thing you want to basically try to deal with, is you're basically having a real problem with people accepting it. And that was what he was basically saying, is I can't accept the fact that you're saying that this evidence that's earlier that looks like it matches the Exodus can't be connected at all. This is just a he was basically saying in that document is just a beautiful illusion. It's what it purports itself to be a historical document, but it's not. So you're like, but with the audience, when they stand back and look at it, they're saying, wait a minute, I think this does match all of that. And that's basically why the film has had such great, I think, appeal, is because we're showing something and you're kind of being able to look between the cracks and see some of the sort of academic bias about it.
Most definitely. There's a couple questions, and I'll go with one of these first, because I think it's a pretty valid question, because there's a lot of information getting thrown out there about who the Egyptians were, their race, their identity, and you had said that Joseph, or the possibility of Joseph, had red hair and all these different things. They said, why did their brothers not recognize him if he was so different from the regular Egyptians? And I thought that was a pretty good question. But at the same time, I know that there's answers, probably good answers you could give us on that.
Yeah, you mean, yes. I suppose the thing, you know, depending upon, you're saying, why didn't Joseph's brothers recognize him? And maybe with the eye paint and the fact that he had grown up and maybe he was wearing a crown or something, they might not have recognized, you know, who he was. And maybe Joseph knew he had to sort of mask who he was to his brothers as well. I find that one of the most touching. Whenever I read the scene of Joseph with his brothers, it brings tears to my eyes, because I can't imagine Joseph sitting in that setting and knowing what he knew and knowing the betrayal that he had and knowing the love he had for his family and everything, and what he had to go through. So I don't know if I'm answering the question very well, but I would say that I believe Joseph didn't look like an Egyptian. He looked, but he probably partially looked like an Egyptian because of maybe the clothing and the makeup that he would have worn as an Egyptian or whatever. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And one thing, too, that I would add to this question or comment is that just because he may not have looked like an Egyptian doesn't mean they would recognize him anyway. I mean, it had been years had passed since they had put him into that position of slavery. Plus, you know, you look at Egyptian pharaohs, you look at the way they dress. A lot of them have shaved heads. They have headdresses. They wear makeup. There's a lot of things about them that would alter the way that they looked. Anyway, and so, like, you know, there's a real, obviously they would know whether or not he was red hair or whatever, they wouldn't have recognized him. So that's not necessarily telling us his race or anything. And I think that's what they're trying to get at. Like, you know, he couldn't have been red haired, or he couldn't have been this if they didn't recognize him, which isn't true, because they could, you know, you could easily not recognize somebody, and just because he's one race doesn't automatically mean they're going to think this is my brother, because they didn't even know he went over to Egypt. So that's, I guess that's where I'm kind of going with that. But okay, so this next question, and Jake, do you want me to ask this next one?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay, this one was from Jennifer, and she says, would you ask him what source material was used to uncover the Egyptian governors who were ruling before Joseph brought up all the land for Pharaoh?
I don't know if I understand that question.
I guess what source, and I don't either, because it's worded a little, if you guys want to clarify on it, but I think what they're saying is, what is the source material you used to uncover the Egyptian governors that were ruling before Joseph? And
so what did you find, probably, I think is what she's saying there. Like, did you find anything identifying the rulers before Joseph?
Well, you're talking about the pharaoh, the type of pharaohs that would have been before the time of Joseph, or?
Well, she said Egyptian governors. So again, we can probably get clarification on the question, but just expand upon that as you can, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that I can. I don't know if I have. Okay. I think that there's a particular time when there was rulers that match, and I think in the book, you know, we talk about that you know, what's happening is I'm dealing with different parts of history right now, and I've got to try to certain names. But let me see if I can find that.
We can buy you a little bit of time while you're looking for that real quick, Tim. I just want to, again, John, thank you for joining us tonight. And also, I want to thank the Now You See TV audience for joining us as well. John stopped his show about an hour early to come over to take part of this. When I told him I was interviewing Tim, he was really excited about that.
Yeah.
So, you at a place now, Tim? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
During the Middle Kingdom, there were two pharaohs, and I think that there was a father-son, and one was called Sennacherib the third and Amenemhat the third. And these two pharaohs, there was an interesting thing that happened. There was a huge rise in productivity. In fact, I think there was even what David Rohl has said is that there was a time when it was instituted a time for gathering grain. It was like the time of the people's giving was instituted, and there was even toys that looked like little grain elevators and things like that. And so there was massive development and growth, and they even built a huge super fort, a giant super fort in the southern part of Egypt. And it was also during this time when one of the pharaohs had a very, very saddened look, and it's in the film, it's in the book as well, where he doesn't look like any other pharaohs in history. And what the interpretation of that was he was trying to show that he was concerned, that something was happening. And this whole idea, there's a canal that was built at that time near his tomb, or near his pyramid, and it was called Bar Yosef, or the Canal of Joseph. And it had been called that for many times, but it was sort of a chute off from the Nile. It shot off into another lake. And so the speculation has been, is that could that have been in preparation for flooding or storing water for a time of famine? And so we go into more detail in the book, and we do a little bit in the film that we talk about that. But that there were rulers like that had a unique, that you could see that the potential story fit with what was happening during their reign. I don't know if that's the answer that they were looking at, but the other thing is that in the book we talk about there was a particular kind of title that Joseph had. And it was a unique title, and people didn't think that you could put those two together. It wasn't until recently when they actually found that those titles actually did coexist. And Dr. Charles Ailing talks about that. We have an extended box set, by the way, which was 10 additional hours. It's a 5-disc box set that I said, we have all this information with extended interviews that we should put. And we talk about more evidence in one DVD. Why is the Bible not allowed to be acceptable in archaeology? And then the impact and commentary from a number of different people. And so we've expanded to an additional 10 hours of information about it. If you're interested, that's on our website at patternsofevidence.com.
So Tim, real quick, let me ask you, what is it that are you working on anything right now? I mean, I know you're really busy kind of touring on this particular topic. Do you have plans for anything coming up that you can tell us about?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Last year I could see that we had an opportunity to do a children's version of this. So I ended up starting to film with 10 kids, and we made a really fantastic young, it's called Patterns of Evidence Young Explorers. And it's a fairly big, robust effort. There's a virtual component to it where we go into what's called the exploration chamber. And I take these kids into this exploration chamber where we can go to the wall of time, and we can go to different places. We take a hot air balloon over Avaris, and we look at the ancient city of these areas where Joseph might have lived. And so it's very visual. And each week the kids get an assignment, and they read in their Bibles what we're going to investigate, and then we go investigate it. So that's one thing that we're working on. We're coming out with another book, which is a kind of a small group study. It's almost on the level of like Francis Schaeffer or C.S. Lewis, kind of deep thinking, taking patterns and mirroring that. There'll be videos connected with that, and it works with our movie event kit. And then we are working on the next, instead of making another film, we're going to make a series, like a 13-part, 13-hour series. So we're going to take the first film and expand that all the way into which way did they go after they left Egypt, what sea did they cross, what mountain did they go to, what happened at that mountain that changed the world. We're going to deal with the Israel and the covenant that God made with Israel. We're going to take the life of Moses, and we're going to go all the way through from his birth all the way to Mount Nebo, and we're going to cover that Exodus journey and parts of the conquest, that in that 13-hour series. And that's what we're working on right now.
Interesting. So instead of a film, which is you're talking shorter, you're talking about an extended series then that's going to be like 12 parts or something like that? Yes.
And each one will probably be around 15 minutes. What we found was people said, man, that film was so dense that we needed, a lot more. We needed some time to to chew, and we have just so much information. And I had been filming the route earlier, and so we've got about half of this in the can already, and we just are now working on. We've got the films outlined, and we're just working on a lot more of just. We're getting ready to head out and start going back to the Middle East and to Europe to film the rest of it.
Wow, that sounds really exciting, Tim. Well, hey, man, I want to thank you for coming on with us tonight. John, do you have any more questions tonight for Tim?
Well, I'm amazed to be on here. I'm glad and thankful, Tim, to be able to be a part of this. I mean, when Jake told me he was having you on, I was like, dude, this is awesome. And he was like, hey, you want to come on? I'm like, of course, definitely I want to come on because I love the documentary. There is one question that I do have because it's coming up in the chat a lot, and this will be my last question. And I don't think that I don't know if you know the answer to this. I mean, it's just a question. But there are a lot of theories on the race of Egyptians: black, white, mixed race, and the ancient Hebrews. Since you've studied a lot of the Egyptology, you studied a lot of the ancient Hebrew civilizations based on your documentary. And the picture I'm showing here, I know this is an odd picture, but this shows the different cosmetics of the ancient Egyptians. And I'm looking here at a mixed multitude myself, but I didn't know if there's any evidence that proves one way or the other.
You know, I don't know that I have an answer for you for any of that. As far as what race are the Egyptians versus the Hebrews. I do know that if you go to Israel, very interesting. I went to Haifa. I can share this with you. Is that there was a Dr. Skorecki, and he is a DNA scientist, and they had these people that were very dark skinned from Ethiopia that said they were Jewish, and they had these people from Europe that said they were Jewish, very light-skinned, and they had people from India that said they were Jewish, and a lot of them said they were what was called Kohanim. They were from the priestly line, and so what he ended up doing was he did a DNA test. He basically worked with other researchers around the world, and they tested these people from South America to Europe and Middle East, and they ended up finding out that these people that said they were related were related. They were related to one common ancestor, but they didn't look like they were, related. And so, obviously, on the Jewish side of things, if you go to Israel, you'll notice that you'll see lots of different types of people, and they all say that they're Jewish, a lot of them, and there's different looks. And if you think about the tribes, there were different, obviously there's different people within those tribes as well. And so all that to say is Dr. Skorecki then submitted that document to like the World Science and in a paper, and it stood up. And the other fascinating thing I'll share with you, which I talked on Sunday to a group, was that if we go back, the generation back to that common ancestor was about 105 generations to 140 generations. So what we're saying is that if we took our own generations and went back, to your father, to your grandfather, to your great grandfather, to your great great grandfather, that it went back to only about 104 generations, to the greatest about 140, back to the time of the Exodus. So what that's saying is that if you took 35 years, roughly, and went back 100 people, you would get back to the time of the Exodus. Isn't that amazing when you think about that?
Oh, yeah. Very.
I mean, in other words, only 30 descendants of yours would take you back to the time of Moses. I'm sorry, 100 descendants. If they had a child every 35 years. You get what I'm getting at here?
Yeah.
Because it seems like 3,500 years ago seems like a very long time, but it's really not.
And people, one thing too that people kind of overlook is the idea that based on the region that you live in, based on the food you eat, based on a lot of things, your DNA over time changes your colors of your skin. You look at the polar bear, you look at the brown bear, you look at humans in general. Enough time in a certain area having children, consistently having children, eating the same foods that are designated to their area, there's the DNA slowly adapts to the areas that you're in. So it's almost, it's irrelevant anyway. I mean, what color they were, but at the same time, I would love to see, you know, a real study done on that, because most of the stuff I've seen is very biased in opinions on those different things. But that's an interesting. We'll have to check that out. Definitely, I just never seen that before. So, but yeah, that's all the questions I had. I had a good time, guys, and I'm just appreciative. And I'd love.
And Tim, is it okay if I connect you with John via email or something like that? Because I'm sure he'd love to have you on Now You See TV. So.
Oh yeah, that'd be great, guys. I really appreciate the fact that you're doing this, and thank you. I don't know if I did a very good job of communicating, but
you did fantastic, man. You did great, and really fascinating stuff. I'm gonna watch it on Netflix here this week and take a peek at it, because honestly, man, I have not seen the documentary yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. After doing a little bit of research, I found out a lot of people are excited about what you've done here. So. That's awesome, man. Thank you again for joining us tonight, Tim. Maybe we can have you back when you start into your getting far enough in your next project where you can talk about your findings and whatnot. Tell everybody again where they can get your basically everything you're offering.
Yeah, we basically have. I got a book right here. This is Patterns of Evidence, the big book, which tells the story of my journey on this. We've got we got other books by Egyptologists, and The Lost Sea of the Exodus is another great one. We've got the DVDs that are coming out with the box set and the Young Explorers, and they can go to patternsofevidence.com, patternsofevidence.com. And not only that, but if you guys are really interested, you can sign up and be a thinker, get thinker update emails.
Yes.
We give new evidence that's happening, stuff that comes out of Jerusalem, like the new temple. Tiles that came out just recently. We had a really great post on that. We've got one that just came out with the scroll that was burnt, and we'll give more in-depth information about that and about the new stuff that we're creating. So you can follow us. We've got thousands of people that are doing that, and sometimes people have ideas they want us to, you know, to explore, to learn about. We've got people around the world. Patterns of Evidence now is worldwide on Netflix, but it doesn't last on Netflix forever. That's why it's important to get your own copy, and we find it's very shareable. If you've got family members that are, let's say, skeptics or whatever, this is a great sort of non-threatening film to basically show to them or give them, or sit down and you can go out afterwards and just talk about it, because it really does try to be as objective as possible.
Cool. Well, thanks again for joining us, Tim. I'm going to stay on here with a few for John and go into a little bit of overdrive. Okay. But, man, I look forward to having you back. God bless you, sir, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, nice to meet both of you, man. Talk with you later.
Right. You too.
Big expect email from me tonight, and Now You See TV, because I definitely want to have you on as soon as possible. It was exciting, and thanks again.
Okay, sounds good. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Hey, so, John, real quick, man, since I got you on here with me, I can't let you go just that easy, just with having the guests. So tell us a little bit kind of what's going on with Now You See TV, man. Let's do a few rabbit trails. What's going on in your world over there, man?
Man, not near as much as going on in your world, man. Mr. Skywatch Now, you've been in Skywatch Now, what, 2 months now? Or, well, you started in September. Man, God's really blessing you. It's crazy because me and Jake, for most of you guys that don't know, we've known each other for a while now. We've actually done work together. We went and visited Eric Judkins in Texas and did a documentary with him. We've known each other long before any of this stuff was going down. Back when Now You See TV was just a few thousand subscribers, not really doing anything. Back when Seek for Truth was not really doing it. We've known each other for a while. So now we kind of see this, and I owe a lot to Jake, and me and him have just really kind of helped each other through this whole process, just motivating each other, helping each other when we find out new things about what we can do to help do better. And so it's awesome to be on here with him. One of my best friends for sure. And it's just,
and I'll just kind of give them the story, guys. Back in, it was 2014. I believe it was towards the end of 2014 that I'd been doing an audio podcast. Really felt the Lord's leading to just continue in this stuff. And I wanted to get into video. I wanted to do more audio, but I didn't really know who to turn to do any marketing or anything like that. And man, God totally connected me with John we instantly clicked. And it was like from the day we met, we instantly started bouncing stuff off of each other, and it was like wind in our sails. And suddenly the next thing you know, we're both pushing after, moving forward, and basically doing stuff to spread the gospel and to just basically learn about promoting. And man, so I learned so much from John and vice versa, just in a short period of time. I mean, John, 6 months ago, or about a year ago now, I mean, you were probably at a place where subscribers just really weren't there wasn't a lot going on with Now You See TV. And I look at it now, man, and it is amazing because you are just doing so much, man, talking with so many people, and it's really blowing up, man. So to be on the Sharpening Report and be with this audience, and then to have you on as a co-host and a guest, it's just amazing, man. So just a huge blessing, man.
God has done so much in our lives, Jake. There's no doubt about that. And you're right. I mean, back then, I mean, I was with Now You See TV. I had so much other things going on that I could never really focus fully on Now You See TV to do it. I think we did like one show every like 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, it was just really hard getting it together. The documentary we went to Texas to do, that was few and far between doing stuff like that. I mean, I loved doing it always, but we had so much stuff going on. You had stuff going on in your life. I had stuff going on in my life. And I think the moment we decided, look, this is what we're going to do. And I know, at least for me, the moment I'm like, I'm going to do Now You See TV. I'm going to make this something to where listeners can listen all the time, because I see so much propaganda, so much crazy stuff that's for the enemy that people have readily available. But yet for our side, there's not a lot. And I know there's a lot of other companies out there that are doing the stuff, but the harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. So I said, and I prayed about this. I said, God, I'm going all in. I'm going all in for what we're doing. I'm going to do shows as often as possible, give people something to have, give them meat, because even you go to the churches, you don't get this kind of information at every church.
No. And it's interesting, man, because the church that I went to, actually, before I'd left to come here, our pastor actually talked on Genesis 6, transhumanism, and like all these things. And I was like, man, like that is the first time I had ever heard it in the four walls of a church, talking about all these topics that are clearly in the Bible, but they're kind of danced around because ministers think they're far out there. They don't really know how to explain them. But in reality, man, the whole gospel's far out, because there's all these supernatural events occurring in the Bible.
Yeah, and I think one thing we both agree on is the passed down system has been great about shutting the supernatural out of our lives and putting a veil over our eyes that keeps the supernatural. But believe it or not, folks, the whole Bible is supernatural. For everything from a talking donkey to a guy that raises up out of the grave, to the person getting their eyes healed, to a person raised. I can go on and on. I mean, the creation of the world, everything's supernatural about the scripture. And but right now in America, or especially in America, some other countries have more supernatural things going on because they're not blinded by this idea that everything's natural. In America, it's almost mandatory. If your church, if you want your church numbers to grow, you want this or that, the supernatural aspect has to be cut out of it. Everything has to be explained scientifically. Everything has to be done this way, historically, whatnot. And when the Bible is literal, it's a supernatural book. And the moment that people figure that out, it's really hard to stay in church sometimes. And it's sad. There are good churches out there, but there's a lot of them that are just so dead. They feed you milk constantly. And it's like low fat skim milk, Jake. It's not even really good milk they're feeding their audience with. They never grow up. They never get into the meat of the scripture. And so that's why I love what we're doing now, man. God's blessed you a lot too. Josh Peck is an awesome guy. I'm so thankful to be able to be on the Sharpening Report. None of us agree fully 100% on anything. I know that for sure. And we agree on some things, but we all have our differences of opinion on certain things. But the core, which is the most important thing, we believe in salvation through Yeshua. Yes. And we believe that that's the only way to the Father. And we believe that all the other pieces fall together when you decide you're going to worship him, serve him, and follow him. And so we can disagree on some of these things, but the main core is we're out there trying to reach people, bring them into the fold so that they don't get lost by the wayside. And that's what I love about this whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now, man, with because right now this whole situation with Trump and Hillary and everything going on in politics. I saw a post by Perry Stone today, and he basically said he's leaving the two-party system and basically joining the independent party. And he talks about some end times prophecy that talks about the eagle with three heads or three heads of an eagle, and he believes that that could be literally a three-party system involving independents, liberals, and Democrats, and kind of an end-time stretch now where people get so fed up with this system that is so broken that they decide we're going to go our own way outside of that system. And as you know, John, the independent system has not been able to really successfully do anything. But I think those days are going to change. Trump is an outsider. What's your take on what's going on with this stuff, man?
Well, man, it's really tough to say 100% what is going on. I can tell you this: these are the facts that I believe I have. Everything else is speculation, okay? Because we don't know anything other than what we're told when it comes to a lot of these things. We don't know anything other than what they let us hear. So we have a limited knowledge on these things. But I can give you my opinion, but it's not scripture. It's not prophecy.
Sure. Yeah. We're just having a conversation here.
This is the first book of opinions, chapter 5, verse 3. So, so in my opinion,
book of John, yeah,
book of John, yeah. Hillary is wicked, in my opinion, and just all the stuff that she's done. First off, she's pro-abortion. Off the bat, that right there is enough to say this woman is not the person for the job. Anybody that would kill a baby, and we can argue whether it's not a murder of a baby or not. That is a wicked thing to happen. We've done a show about this, Jake. We did a show not too long on Babylon. We got a show called Babylon Busters with David Carrico, but what is it? Babylon Now, right? Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon Now. We've done several of those. I'd like to get back to it, man, because the Babylon Now series is very needed, and there's so much more we could do there.
Yeah, no doubt. And it was the documentary. It was the show we did about it was how abortion ties into ancient ritual murders of babies and how it ties into ancient sacrifices like Moloch and all these different things. And so that we did a show about that. So that's what it is. She's also a racist, friends with Margaret Sanger, which was the person that founded Planned Parenthood. She said a lot of evil things about the black people. She said a lot of evil things about people in general. They look at us like cattle anyway, so we're all cattle to them. There's black cattle, white cattle. They don't really care. We're all cows. We're easy to slaughter. They don't really care. But she's also there's books been written about her by people that work for her. A lot of people end up dead in a trail of people that tried to expose her. People dead. Benghazi. The list could go on. All the emails that have gotten rid of. This lady should be in prison. There's no doubt about it. And so, okay, we got Hillary. First off, the fact that she's even allowed to run for president is just amazing to me. I can't believe it. We got Donald Trump, which has never been a politician. He's been a businessman for a long time, successful businessman. Sometimes he's had his ups and downs, whatever. He's not obviously not Billy Graham, or he's not, and whatever, I don't know, whoever you want to put up there, but he's not a hardcore believer. Some speculate he's a new believer, which may be possible. I mean, that's the one thing too. Christians have a lot of judging going on with all this stuff. They say, oh, this guy's not a new believer. You don't know that. The only person that can judge that heart is the Messiah. So we have to look at it that way. He's the only one that can judge that. There's judgments that we're allowed to judge on, but judging a person's salvation is something that we cannot do. Especially as a new believer. When I was a new believer, I still had a lot of crazy stuff going on in my life because I didn't know, I wasn't fully sanctified yet. So just because you're a new believer and you still have some things going on, it takes time to be sanctified. So we don't know for sure if he's a new believer. I know a lot of the mainstream pastors and stuff like that are praying over him, trying to push him to this next level. But at the same time, the love of money is the root of all evil, and you can't serve God and money. I look at that as a possibility too. How can he serve God and serve money at the same time? Is this going to be possible? And then I think about the idea that God uses these kings. He sets them up. He puts them in their place. And he does with them. So I know no matter who we get, obviously God sets them up. A lot of people would say no, the devil sets people up. But when I think about the scriptures that prove that God sets them up, we get the rulers that we deserve based on how we are. So if we do get Hillary, if we do get whatever, we deserve it. I mean, maybe not us personally that are listening to the show, as a whole, we deserve whatever we get. And so I don't know if it's set up. I can to tell you the truth, almost every other election has been set up in the past. You look at almost every president we have, other than ones that have been assassinated, have gone right along with the globalist agenda. The ones that have been assassinated, a common connection with them, they tried to start their own banking system for the United States and get rid of the Federal Reserve. They also want to end secret societies. They want to do a lot of things that was anti-globalist agenda. And so you look at that, and like I said, it's hard for me to think, who do I prefer in the whole thing? I prefer Trump. Whether or not he is our votes matter, I don't know. There's so many different things that I can look at. I don't think our votes really do matter. I think our votes are, whoever decides happens. And like I said, Yahweh decides who the kings are. He's the one that sets them up. It's interesting, man, to say the least. I watched the Trey Smith documentary on that, of him being a form of Cyrus. That was interesting. I've also, I've always, up to this election, I've always believed that no matter who we get, we're getting this. We're either getting the puppet on the right hand or puppet on the left hand, but it's the same head talking for the puppets. But I think when I look at Trump, the globalists hate him. They hate him. At least this is what we're led to believe, Jake. I mean, we look at the news. We look at all the different things. We're led to believe that the globalists hate Trump. I do know this: some of the most worldly people I know, personally, hate Trump. They're stealing his signs, throwing them all over the place. And also some of the most godly people I know hate Trump. So it's hard to know, man. I can't judge. I have no judgment on this issue. And I don't know if I'm even going to vote because of it. I just don't know what to think. I know that it looks like Trump is anti-globalist. It looks like they're scared of him getting in office.
Hey, one second, John. I just want to address something real quick. I told someone that the three-headed eagle was in Ezra 11:1. Ezra only goes up to 10. So obviously that's the wrong scripture. I just want to address that real quick. I will find the correct listing for that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, and somebody in the chat brought up a really good point. Cott did. We had Timothy Alberino on not too long ago, and he was talking about Hillary could be a vehicle to use to get Cain in the place of power. He's a Jesuit trained and educated. And he is big time Jesuit, Pope Francis Jesuit. Hillary seems to have health problems. And if he is the one lead in this false prophet or false whatever Messiah or whatever this guy is, this Pope, there's so much information. It's hard to throw it all together because you look at the prophecy of the popes, you look at the Jesuits that have taken over the Vatican, you look at Hillary Clinton being an evil, wicked woman, you look at Donald Trump being a possible anti-globalist, you look at the prophecies in the scripture, you look at the other prophecies in other books, you look at all these different things. It seems like we're all coming to a head here. Something's going to happen here, Jake, and I don't know what. I've been trying to put it all together, but it's almost impossible. I mean, I've had so many different guests on to talk about this whole thing, but I do think that I know that if we have Hillary in, shows like this won't happen anymore. She will shut everything down. Me and you won't be allowed to continue. At least anybody that speaks up will not be allowed to continue in general. Like, we pride ourselves on being able to say whatever we want to say. And that may not be able to happen anymore after she's in, because she's spoken out adamantly about taking away freedom of speech, adamantly about taking away freedom of our Second Amendment rights of having weapons. All these different things she's spoken out adamantly against. And she is she's the kind of lady that doesn't care what anybody thinks other than her own agenda. And so if Trump gets in, I don't know what's going to happen. I think there'll be riots. This is something that I've talked about on my show before. If Trump gets in, be very careful, because just save. I would. This is my opinion, of course. If Trump gets elected, there will be riots for maybe a few weeks, if not more. Make sure you have plenty of water for your family, plenty of food come November 8th, and just a way to be able to relax and not be in the middle of chaos. Because if they're going to riot over some criminal getting shot in Ferguson, imagine what they'll do if Trump gets elected, or imagine what these hate organizations will do. And
But
we're not just black people. We're talking about, we're talking about all these different hate organizations that come together to loot, to riot, to do all this. They just use it as an excuse. They don't really care. It's like, oh, an excuse to go freaking crazy. Let's do it, And so that's what they got.
right. And if you're going to talk about caring about a particular group of people or whatever, then the action should line up with that. In reality, the gun situation has killed so few people, and I'm not justifying that everything that's gone down is correct, but these groups have a way of getting you focused on one bad thing that happened to a few people and trying to get the masses frustrated and divided. And it's a tool, man. You can't buy the bait. You have to realize that people act independently. Yes, there are some police, I'm sure, that act out of the wrong spirit or the wrong attitude, whatever. But man, the answer is not to riot in the street. And when you do that, and if it does happen in November, the people that do that will be dealt with force, whatever. And those people just weed themselves out of the genetic gene pool, essentially, because I'm telling you right now, when the Katrina thing hit, I talked to a few people. And I had a pastor one time come to our church from the area, and he said that what happened with a lot of the people in that area was that there was actually some black ops going on, because basically they didn't want to cause a big riot or anything, but the people that were looting and shooting people, and we're not talking races here, we're just talking individuals that were doing this stuff, that basically there were black choppers coming in, spec ops going in at nighttime. Anybody with a gun that wasn't a cop, they were just taken out. And so in reality, like, a lot of the people that were killed by bullets and not the flooding. And it was kind of a scientific experiment for our government, I believe, because they had the opportunity to see what would happen in mass panic. So I don't know if you'd ever heard of that, John, but I think it's interesting, and I wouldn't put it past our leaders to do something like that.
Not at all, because they're not going to we don't have the manpower as our nation's military to come in and take over every part of the United States. Okay. Yeah. Some parts they can go into the big cities, they can do whatever. So I think you're right. There's the mass pandemic is going to cause people to go berserk anyway. Also, for those of you that are listeners to Now You See TV, and also those of you that are listeners to the Sharpening Report, most of you have heard of the conspiracies. You've heard of the conspiracies of the secret societies for ages. Sorry, my headphones went out for a second. You've heard of these secret societies' agendas, and you look at Albert Pike's letter that he sent, and you look at the World War I, World War II, World War III. This was written long before those things started, but they line up exactly the way that they planned. World War III is going to be between Zionists and Muslims, and that's one thing that they talk about. Then they talk about it getting so bad that anarchists and atheists are running through the streets, killing people. Mass craziness, just madness going on at this point, to where Christians find themselves, to the point of just not knowing where to go from there, so that they'll accept the light of Lucifer. This is their plan. And if you look at if you want to look this up, look at Albert Pike, World Wars, World War I, II, and III, and it talks about his letter. This letter was published. It talks about this letter, and I believe this letter was found. I could get into more detail about it if you want, but this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with, something that's been setting up for a long time. I mean, they called World War I, World War II to the T. World War III looks like it's to the T too. You see Zionists and Muslims. This has been going on, and let me say this, that a lot of this stuff has been set up for centuries from the beginning, in my opinion, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out, Jake. I'm just want to warn people that on November 8th, get yourself a spot to be able to at least have some food and water for your family, especially if you have kids and stuff. Man, nobody, especially water, 3 days without water and you're dead. So if in the November the elections, you have the possibility to visit family in a rural area or whatever, I would recommend that. This is what I told people all along, man, because you just don't know, and if something happens, generally, I would like to think it would be gotten under control in a short period of time. But the last thing I want to be is stuck in the middle of a big city when rioting and all that breaks out. Now, if you don't have an option, then you're going to have to trust God and pray and basically do what you can do to protect yourself or whatever. But
man, I don't think it's going to be. I'm hoping it's not as bad as what all these people are saying it will be. But I don't know, man. I don't know. People are just on both sides of the aisle. People are just frustrated, you know. And the problem is that the two-party system is kind of working against itself. It's broken on both sides. They're playing games on both sides, and both sides of the party feel tricked and duped and whatever. This isn't even about politics, man. This is really, for me, it comes down to more morality issues and righteousness and all these things that the two-party system is really abandoned. I mean, the Republican side is attacking Trump at times as much as the Democrat side, and that's what gives me a little bit of hope about Trump. Is I feel that he is still an outsider, and I've heard what you said about the Jesuit stuff and all that, but man, he is not part of the Masonic Freemason Society, which every president has been members of, Freemasonry, or what is it, Skull and Crossbones, and all these societies. And there's actually a ritual supposedly that goes on with the inauguration of each president in the Masonic, in like the Masonic headquarters, basically, that the president is actually involved in this supposed ritual. And honestly, man, with all the Freemasonry stuff you see in Washington, D.C., to me, that I wouldn't put it past them at all. It's everywhere. You've got the obelisk at the Washington Mall. It's everywhere. You have, I mean, Washington and our country is just steeped in this Masonic junk that has occultic roots. So
yeah,
I don't know, man. I hope he is outside the system. I hope something does change, but if not, you know,
no, I'm the same way. I speculate that the idea, and I'm hoping, you know, it's never wrong to have hope that, you know, maybe this could be possible. And I see your points of view on that for sure. And I feel the same way, but at the same time, you know, it's hard for me to believe. It would be hard for me to believe that, because with the most of the stuff we see about the Republicans hating him and the Democrats hating him, this could be, I mean, if you're writing a play and you're trying to deceive people, this is such an elaborate deception, which is very possible as well. And it's hard to call. And that's why I'm not quick to say I'm all in for Trump or I'm all in for whatever. I'm not quick to say it because I don't know, but you're right. It seems like he's the best man, but at the same time,
I'm gonna rewind back in time, man. When Trump first announced his candidacy, and I was like, this guy is crazy. There's no way this guy has a shot. And the first thing John Pounders told me was, he's like, man, I think this might be the guy. And I was like, you are so wrong. I was like, there's no way this guy gets past the primaries. And here we are. And dude, I'm like, okay, what else has John told me here recently? Yeah. Because dude, you hit and you even talked about, what was it, the scripture about the last Trump, playing on words and all. Yeah, I was like, man, you're just out there. And I look at what's going on now, man, and he's a fearsome contender in this. Like, this could happen.
I think I even speculated ideas like, what if he picks Mike Pence from Indiana, trumpets, and he was like, yeah. I knew, like, I just knew as soon as he ran, because I mean, you look at the American, and it's not because God told me or anything like that. You look at the way America has been treated. You look at the opinion. You look at the way people feel about our country. People they don't want this. They don't want this anymore. They're tired of all these career politicians that are just a little uppity, whatever you want to call them. I mean, I could think of a lot of great words to call them, but I'm not going to do it on the show. But you think of a lot of, you know, really good words for these people, and they are the epitome of what we hate in life. You know, they're epitome of a rich little spoiled brat getting their way, making rules for everybody. Bow down before me, you little serfs. That's what we get when we see politicians. And then so when we see somebody like Trump, who's not a politician, everybody can't stand him, that's a part of the politician group, automatically you root for that guy. And that's just the way it works. I mean, it's not necessarily that it's true, but maybe like I said, maybe just because I knew that, it could be possible that they knew that too, and so they're making it seem that way. It's so hard to know for sure, man. I really don't know, and it's just crazy. But I know this, that Yahweh's in control no matter what. He's always been faithful to his servants, and one way or another, nobody's getting out of here alive anyway. We can't sit here and say, I want to, you know, we're all going to die at one point, and unless we make it to the very end, and you know, Yahweh resurrects everybody. We all join him, whatever. If we make it to the end, yeah, we can make it to the end. But I mean, in most life throughout the centuries, everybody that's died is, you know, literally died, and except for Elijah and Enoch. So we're all gonna die somehow, probably.
Well, you know, when it comes down to it, history repeats itself, and we see that time and time again. Things happening. The Great Depression happened. It's time for another probably collapse at some point. I hate to say that, but if God doesn't do something, and if something doesn't happen in our nation, we're headed for that. But the history repeats time and time again. I want to veer away from this topic now, John, because we've kind of capitalized on this a lot, and just talk about something that I think is very interesting. I don't know if the audience will be interested in it, but it is this latest craze of the creepy clown scenarios across the United States. And I want to source an article tonight from CNN that basically they're talking about this isn't the first time we've seen a wave of clown sightings in the United States. They basically say after eerily similar events occurred in Boston in the 1980s, that basically there was something that was come up with called the phantom clown theory by a cryptozoologist that basically said they attributed the proliferation of clown sightings to mass hysteria, usually sparked by incidents witnessed only by children. So basically, they're saying it's impossible to determine which of these incidents are hoaxes and which are bona fide tales of clowning around taken to the extreme. Nonetheless, the perpetrators seem to be capitalizing on our long-standing love-hate relationship with clowns. And so this has happened before, but it's happening again. And you're seeing these people come up all over the nation doing this stuff. My theory is it's just kids that think it's hilarious, and they're going to get shot. I mean, I've had conversations with people that I work with and different things, and it's almost a daily thing is we're like, man, who is the next creepy clown that's going to get shot? It's happening everywhere. Has it happened there in Evansville, John?
Yeah, man, I did a video about it. Actually, it's only a couple minutes. If you want me to stream it real quick, it's I did a video about it the other day. It's got like 200,000 plays. I just did it the other day.
Will it stream without lagging on me? Is it gonna be
the audio
video?
The audio will be fine, and
okay.
The video itself might lag a little bit, but it's not. It's mainly pictures and stuff. But this is
Let's go for it.
This is about the setup that's going on here in Evansville. Hold on one second, let me get it pulled up. But
while he's talking about that, basically, you know, in some of these articles I read, you know, this love-hate relationship.
Sorry about that. Go ahead. I didn't mean to do that. Go ahead, Jake.
No, I was just saying there's kind of a love-hate relationship that people have with clowns. It's been in horror films. You know, and clowns in general are just kind of creepy. To me, it's scary when someone puts on white grease paint and a red nose. That doesn't sound like fun to me. To me, that is scary. And what is a creepy clown and what's not a creepy clown? In my opinion, they're all creepy. But you got the video ready, John?
I do have the video ready, and there's something I'm studying a little bit too lately, Jake, that I didn't do in this video. But I've heard the idea that clowns. There's like mythology about these different clown demons and stuff like that. So it could be something associated with it. But either way, I don't know for sure. But this is the video. The reason I did this video, I hadn't heard about at the time. I hadn't heard about this being a nationwide thing. But as I've been into research to do this video, I found out it was. But here in town, we have this thing called Evansville Watch, and it is basically people that stand by the oh man, what are they called? The radios when the police dispatch, and they put out reports, man, clown reports. And then I saw people were reports. Excuse me. Oh, but just let me play it. How about that? I'm calling.
Sure.
So let's play it. Hello, Now You See TV listeners and family. This is John Pounders. I appreciate all of you And if this is your first time watching, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. We don't claim to be the most professional or conventional, but we do bring you more untapped and adulterated shows and interviews than anyone else. At least that's my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Today, I am bringing this report to you because I happened to notice something on my news feed yesterday. It was a post by our local watchdogs, Evansville Watch. I was curious as to whether or not I could find more, and sure enough, I found plenty. This is not just a local thing. This is all across the USA, according to the Chicago Tribune. I reached out to a local person who I will keep anonymous for her own safety, who has been compiling a profile and detailed reports. Apparently, there are numerous Facebook profiles with clowns that are threatening people. Even one personal threat to the person that said they were going to gut them and that they are planning a purge in Evansville on Halloween night. Also, there is a report of a teen being jumped by 3 clowns in a local park. According to my source, she has tried to file a police report, but has been getting the runaround. I can't help but wonder if the reason this is not at the forefront of warnings locally is because they're afraid that the numbers at the huge upcoming Fall Festival in Evansville may suffer. The Fall Festival is the biggest street festival in the USA next to Mardi Gras and brings in more money for local charity organizations than any other festival. So please be vigilant and safe. I don't know exactly what to make of all this, but if they're planning a purge, you could be in danger. Between Halloween and the controversial elections coming up, times have not been more dangerous. As always, thank you for listening, and please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you, and be blessed. Anyways, that was kind of dramatic, but yeah, that's what was going on in Evansville, Indiana.
Interesting. And, kind of what some of this stems back to, I think where some of this lore and everything stems back to is one of the more notorious serial killers, John Wayne Gacy, who basically he appeared at children's birthday parties as Pogo the Clown. After finding this out, since then, there's been kind of this stigma. Well, I mean, even before that, man, let's face it, people have always been creeped out about clowns. The fact that they're wearing this makeup and they appear to be happy, but are they really? It's a painted on face. So it's like a deception in a disguise. But John Wayne Gacy's situation further entrenched the distrust and kind of the psychological impact of clowns on community. And I know people, man, that my wife absolutely hates clowns. She had an experience years ago at a haunted house. Yes, she was at a haunted house. She wouldn't be doing that today. But she went to a haunted house and had this horrible experience with a clown situation. And now she can't do it. It's something it really bothers her. And that's with a lot of people, man. But there is something to it. And I believe there's definitely a spiritual element. I think some of these people are probably crazy. Some of them are possessed, whatever. And then some of them are kids just wanting to have a good time. But it's the newest craze, man. It kind of reminds me of the zombie apocalypse stuff, where you see SWAT type vehicles that say zombie squad, or you got Jeeps that are kind of decked out. I predict, man, in the next 6 months to a year, you'll start seeing all these, more and more jokes about the clown, taking out the clowns. And for whatever reason, it's just kind of a mounting fascination with the public. It's just kind of a pop culture thing.
Yeah, it's interesting the way it's all playing out. And here it's crazy. People are talking about it all the time. I mean, I have, obviously I have a lot of friends here in Evansville, Indiana, but they're talking about it every day. So it's not as many clown sightings recently. I think anybody in their right mind that doesn't want to get shot shouldn't dress as a clown. So if you're thinking about doing this to scare people, I don't think it's a very good idea. I know that on Halloween, I don't answer the door anyway, because I mean, anybody wearing a mask that comes to my door, I don't care what time of year it is, not happy. It's not gonna do it. I'm sorry, but I value my life more than that. But so definitely not a clown for sure. It's creepy, man. There's no doubt about it. So I don't even know what to think about it all. I think it might be a psych op as well to freak people out further and to see how people trend to this idea. you know, I don't know what to think, man. Shriners are big on clowns too. There's
Well, and there's one of the recent events that just happened is basically it was a creepy clown incident that led to basically child neglect charges for a couple. There was a Wisconsin couple that was charged Friday in neglection charge after leaving their toddler at home to dress up as clowns and scare the neighborhood. Um, Basically, the police received a report that people wearing clown masks and chasing after vehicles in the early morning hours of October 7th. Authorities located two men that were involved in the incident and another woman who had been driving them around. So it was a 29-year-old man, a 6-year-old woman. They left their 4-year-old at home to go around scaring people in the neighborhood. And so, man, again, I just think more and more of these people, man, are going to get shot. And there's got to be something a little bit wrong for you to think, oh, I think I'll go out dressed as a clown and frighten people. I don't know, man.
There's got to be something wrong with you to think that that's a safe thing to do. And probably most of them that do it are not all up there in the head anyway, I wouldn't imagine. But and some of them probably, you know, this movie Purge, Election Purge, did you see the uncanny resemblance to the candidates in Purge?
I saw the cover to it. I won't watch anything like that, but I'm familiar with the topic. The election year has to do with basically what on election night they're killing everybody essentially.
I don't know exactly. I think that's probably what it has to do with, but I posted a meme about it. The outfits that the presidential candidates in the movie were wearing were the exact same color and pretty much the exact same outfits that Hillary and Trump were wearing on the first debate that they had. And I thought that was really interesting. Also, there's clowns in Purge. It's just really weird, man. I don't even know what to think about it all. It's just so crazy. And, you know, I do think it's a psych op to a certain extent. I think that there's I don't know what the reasoning is behind it. It's really hard to tell, but it's definitely, a creepy scenario, man. Clowns are creepy. I don't care who you are if you think clowns are cool. And there's a study that shows almost every kid are scared of clowns. Like, you know, happy clowns, sad clowns, it doesn't really matter. Clowns are creepy. So quit dressing like them creepy old men trying to give us balloons. We don't like it.
Yeah, I agree, man. And, you know, since we touched on the Halloween topic, let's go there too. I know a lot of the viewers here, man, they're going to be totally anti-Halloween and all that. My take on it, man, is like, to be honest, man, I used to just have kind of an ambivalence towards Halloween growing up. You know, we weren't raised participating, but now, man, I loathe it. After seeing some of the darkness and just experiencing some of the things I've experienced from a spiritual perspective and just knowing what darkness is really out there, to have a holiday where you're going to celebrate darkness, to me, I can't connect with it. It's like a total disconnect. To me, it's not fun, man. Darkness is something I run from. And I know you kind of feel the same way, John. I'm sure you've had some just crazy stuff, man. But to me, it's the devil's holiday. And I know there are so many Christians that take their kids trick-or-treating and all that. But for me, I just have a much different relationship with it.
Yeah, same here, man. I think I don't think we should mix light and darkness, try to do that. I know that a lot of churches have their, you know, trunk or treat
right
on. And I understand why their reasoning behind it, but I don't think they should do it. I think if you want to give candy out to people, do it whenever, do it all the time. You know, we have every night where kids can come out there. Most of these churches make millions of dollars anyway. So do a candy night every night. You don't have to do it on Halloween. Just do something for the community that's positive, I guess. But at the same time, mixing the dressing up, that is a pagan ritual. The dressing up as changing who you are to match ghostly status or whatever is a pagan ritual that goes way back. And you know, we're having a Halloween special, I think on the 28th, I think 27th maybe, with William Schnoblin, who you've had on before, and I've had on before, which who is an ex Freemason, ex witch, ex Satanist, and
right,
satanic rituals associated with that. But even he's very in depth with all that knowledge. But you can just go online and find out what what it means to dress up for Halloween in, you know, ancient times. And basically they were trying to blend in with the spirit world because they conjured these spirits that came up on this holiday. And so mixing with that is never good. I don't care. People always want to say, well, you can mix stuff, you can do this or whatever. I just don't agree with it. I think that we're to be set apart. We're to follow after the ways of the scripture and leave the worlds to the world. Let them do their thing. But that's not what we're called to do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And you know, as this time of the year approaches, I'll be glad just to get past the 31st, put it behind us. Thanksgiving, I think everyone can kind of, again, you know, I've joked around with people before, is it's the one holiday that no one seems to have a problem with. Now, whether or not there's pagan roots behind that, I don't know, but the heart and the spirit of it is basically be, for most people, just be thankful to the Lord to what they have. And I think you can say it's biblical to be thankful for what God is given us. Now, whether or not we're supposed to, you know, you got Harvest Festival and all that, you know, the ancient Indians would worship their corn. And I don't know, what's your take on that, John?
I don't know, man. We did a show about Maven, I think it was, is the Harvest Festival. It's there's rituals associated with Harvest Festivals big time in witchcraft, to where they even sacrifice their leader if the lands don't produce properly. So
wow.
Yeah, there's Thanksgiving, I don't know. I mean, I think it's good to give Thanksgiving and spend time with your family like anytime you can, you know. Thanksgiving itself, I'm not aware of any pagan ties to Thanksgiving. Doesn't mean that there isn't, and if I stand corrected, I stand corrected. I mean, I have no problem.
I'm not aware of any, but you know, at least from our historical perspective of the history of our nation and the migration of peoples from Europe to the Americas, you know, I'm not familiar with any pagan rituals involved in that. However, the Native Americans were, you know, and still are, many of them, deeply entrenched in some occultic practices. And I've also heard of many Native Americans who actually worship a one true God. And so people have seen that all across the world, where races of people and groups of people who have never been in contact with other civilizations seem to have this understanding that there is a one true God to serve. And I believe that that's just installed in us as people, that we know that there is a one true God. John, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Computer was freezing up on me. Yeah, there's definitely, you know, we see Paul going over to Greece and talking to the Greeks and saying, you know, you have all these altars for all these gods, but you have one to the unknown God. Let me tell you about him. Let me tell you about the one true God. And he, you know, that was, you can relate that to almost, especially most people would think that that's like a common thought as you. I don't know how to explain this, because I mean, I've talked about this before, but you know, I've done shows about atheism. I've done shows about this, and we've talked about how the atheist that I had on said that, and this was, I deleted the show because I got cussed up a storm, but he was saying the most common thing when you're born, or the preset that you have when you're born, is atheism. And we argued about that. I said, no, I mean, you look at these civilizations, just like you said, Jake, they have this common belief. We're like, well, they were passed it down, but you know, they're passed down from what? From who? You know, why are they passed this thing down? It can't be it's not the preset of humans to believe that. I mean, I think it's very illogical to believe that. And I know this shows that this is not about atheism, but definitely you're right. There's this common belief that there's one true God. They don't always know who it is. A lot of times they revert to worshiping the sun because it brings their harvest. A lot of times they worship the moon because it's light at night, or they worship the holidays. Like, so winter, you know, there are a lot of most ancient civilizations don't like winter. They associate it with bad luck or whatever. And when fall comes around, this is like, you know, this is their time of year. They love it because this is, the sun has come back for more of the day, and it's come closer to us to bring us our crop, or spring has come back to bring us closer to our crops. And then when fall comes, they're happy because they get to harvest their crops, and then they're preparing for winter. And it's just interesting the way it all works. I don't even, I don't understand all of the different civilizations, obviously, but I do know that most of them have a sun or moon worship in some way or another, and they also follow the major.
Well, and let's face it, man. In our modern society, the way that we practice all these holidays and events has changed drastically from the original origins, and that's why so many people have issues with dealing with Christmas and all these other things, because the way that people celebrate today is much different. It's not like it used to be. And so yes, it's morphed, but it still has the roots. And so I see both sides of the story, but I don't know, man. It's really interesting. And I'm just, one thing I just want to say tonight is I'm so thankful for everything God has given me. I'm thankful for the breath in my lungs to be able to do what we're doing, to be able to talk about all these topics, to be able to spread the gospel, to share testimonies. Testimonies are amazing. I had this guy on the other night, Brandon Schwinn. John, you need to talk to him. Amazing story. He basically he shared his testimony on TSR of his addiction to pornography for years, and basically his marriage started to crumble. He got out of it. And he actually talked about the demonic doorways and stuff that were open in the midst of all this, and the supernatural stuff that began to happen in his house when he turned back towards Christ. Everything was cool as far as he went, but his kids would wake up with night terrors on a regular basis, just totally terrorized, right? And so his home was just filled with all this junk because of what was going on. And as he began to wake up and come out of this, he came into contact with what we talk about in Ephesians 6, spiritual warfare. As soon as you take a side in this battle, you are going to have resistance. If you're entrenched with the enemy and you're just going with the crowd, the devil's not afraid of you. He's going to leave you alone. As soon as you start serving Christ, as soon as you're speaking up, as soon as you start saying, basically revealing truth and talking about scripture and the impact of all these things, that's when the enemy now has a serious problem with you, because you're going to wake people up. But it was an amazing testimony. And there's so many people like that have similar testimonies to relating to the spiritual realm when it comes to being a believer. We're on a battlefield, man. We are warriors on a battlefield. You either choose to be in the fight or you choose to be a slave, one of the two.
No doubt about it, Jake. There's no doubt about it. And we've talked about this many times. As soon as we stepped out and started deciding we're going to do what we do, both of us have been attacked pretty heavily in our spiritual walk, in our walks in general in life. And not to be taken lightly, Ephesians 6 isn't playing around when it says put on the whole armor of God, because when you decide to step out and be a warrior, you put yourself in a battlefield.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it.
I want to open up the chat tonight, since I had you on, John, as a guest and a co-host. Guys, I thank you for joining with us tonight and just basically talking. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to throw out there on the topics that we've discussed, or just general thoughts, whatever? I'm going to open up the table to the viewers, to the Now You See TV audience, and the Sharpening Report audience. And what do you guys think right now? What's going on out there? I see someone right now, they're basically saying that that they're still getting spiritual attacks. That's pretty it's not common for everybody, but if you're serving the Lord and trying to do the right things, you're going to encounter some spiritual warfare. I've found that as time goes on, if you've got some doorways that have been opened as a result of prior lifestyle, maybe an involvement in the occult or whatever, it takes time to get free. It takes time to get to a place where you're no longer fighting the enemy. Of course, if you're trying to fight the enemy and still be in his camp at the same time, that's where it can get to be a challenge, because you can't fight the devil and then serve him at the same time, as far as living a sinful lifestyle or whatever. And for me, man, one of my things was just, I dabbled with a few things in the occult in the past, not even knowing it. For instance, I had played a game that was made by the makers of Dungeons and Dragons at one point, and man, I've told you the story, John. I had some serious paranormal stuff going on. My father got involved in Ouija boards and some things when he was younger, and it impacted him. After he got saved, he would wake up and he'd literally be physically choking himself after he became a believer, because basically all those forces. Yeah, Sweet Pea, you can just ask questions right there in the chat. Okay, so John, I'll address this question by Sweet Pea. They said they're basically saying, have you heard that Hillary is actually dead and we're seeing her clones? I'll address this first because I have seen this. I've seen this out there kind of in the fringe community about Hillary clones and all this stuff. One thing I will say is this that is very interesting is when Hillary appeared to be getting really sick, you know, all this stuff with the neurological stuff during that time frame when she was out. It was reported that the woman that is a popular, I guess, Hillary impersonator it appeared that she had somehow stepped in to do some appearances and stuff like that, because in pictures, like it looked like Hillary had basically lost like 30 pounds overnight. You know, her nose looked a little bit different, things like that. And I've seen some of the photographs, and I agree. Maybe during this time when she was sick, she was trying to buy herself some time while she could recuperate her health a little bit. Maybe they did use the impersonator out there. You know, someone else suggested that maybe the impersonator is the sick one. I don't know, but as far as okay, here's the thing. We know that cloning is possible, right? That is not outside the realm of possibility, because Japan or in China, they've got one of the largest cloning facilities in the world now for animals. They even have a sector where you can actually have your pets cloned. The issue that they still have is huge mortality rates, high mortality rates, meaning that the process of replicating a clone is very difficult to totally duplicate that process with the DNA and everything. Now, what they can't do publicly is clone someone's memories and their soul and everything about that person, right? So my issue with this whole theory would be, I do not believe it is possible to clone someone on that level, to be able to actually make a duplicate copy of them that has all your memories, soul, all that stuff, right? It would just simply be a genetic lookalike of you that's very similar but has its own personality and all that. So my opinion in that, man, is it's just too far out there. Don't you agree, John?
I have no idea, man. They asked if this is too fringe for this. I don't think me and Jake have anything too fringe. You can probably talk about we've had, like between me and him. I mean, he won't talk about certain things. I won't talk about certain things. But between me and him, we cover all aspects of the fringe market. You know, fringe market here. So we're pretty fringe. But yeah, at the same time, I don't know. I mean, I've heard a lot of evidence that points to the idea, like Jake said, that their cloning could be possible. But there's also cosmetic surgery that's very possible as well. So even if she is not a clone, if there is a body double, that's stuff that's the thing about body doubles is something that's been going on for a long time. Almost a lot of kings have had body doubles.
Right.
That's a possibility. It's a real possibility. Could she be dead right now? I have no idea how to answer that, but nothing surprises me anymore. Hillary could literally turn into an alien on live TV and shoot somebody in the head on live TV, and it would not surprise me. Would it entertain me? Yeah, it would entertain me, but it wouldn't surprise me. So let's put it that way.
Well, and you know, I interviewed L.A. Marzulli the other night. Someone mentioned the body suits for spirits and all this stuff. In my conversation with him, he basically talked about some of the information they had gotten from different people with abductions and the research and stuff like that is that they believe one of the things he believes is possible is that there's actually a biometric style suit that these things can inhabit and manipulate. And you know what, John, if a demon can possess a person, I don't really see the need for the suit except for the fact that it's taking on a different form. So I guess anything's possible, man. But I do find that totally interesting, but to me, it's just still just such a far stretch. It is such a far stretch to think that she's to that level, or the shape shifting thing, that she is a interdimensional type creature or something. I mean, there's all these French things out there that I really can't go there seriously. I can listen to someone else talk about it. That's fine. But me, myself, I just have to stay somewhat planted in reality and then know that there is a spiritual war going on. There's things that we don't understand, but to jump light years ahead and speculate, unless you have evidence and proof, it's just really hard for me to go there. Okay. Someone, Kelvin mentioned L.A. Marzulli. He said, would like to see what you guys think of his white horse vision. Well, I'll jump in on this, John, and then I'll let you jump in. I myself have not had any visions or anything like that. However, it is biblically recorded. Many people have had these heavenly encounters all throughout the Bible, right? John the Revelator, Paul, all these disciples, all these people going back. Job had some encounters. And so you see this all throughout the Bible, right? And God says he is the day of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? I don't believe that the miracles and all the supernatural stuff stopped happening in the Bible. People did not stop serving God. It's not like God just shut it off and just said, oh, if it's not in the Bible, then it can't happen now. So my take is this. I believe that, as God's word says, that he reveals the secret things to those that love him. And I believe that extra dimensional supernatural encounters are possible. And I've known various people who have had these encounters. And I believe that it's genuine, that God truly loves people that much, that for some people, he gives them that opportunity. Why doesn't he do that for everyone? I don't know. Maybe it's closeness of the relationship. Maybe for some people, it would stifle their faith or lead them in the wrong direction. He knows us better than anyone else. But I do believe it's possible, because if I say someone cannot have a vision of a horse or whatever, then I'm saying that John can have it. Hold on one second, John. I'll be right back. Take over.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with that. There's a lot of things out there that are possibly, so far it's hard to prove it, hard to really get behind some of those things because there's no proof. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on Now You See TV, we do speculate a lot. We say things and we make sure we're speculating. But at the same time, we try to only bring things as close to fact as we can get them, because not everything can be proven 100% all the time. When it comes to cloning, I do believe that they've cloned animals, and they probably have cloned humans. I mean, if you clone animals, they've cloned humans. Yeah, and thank you for talking about my chest congestion. I've been coughing every time I mute the microphone. I'm coughing my lung out. I got this lemon juice, some kind of peppers and honey and peppermint leaves, all kinds of nasty stuff mixed together, lemon juice. And it helps when I drink it in between my coughs, and it keeps me from coughing for a few minutes. I need to get some Mucinex though to cough it out. I can tell you that for sure. It was killing me. But I haven't, before this, I hadn't slept for 3 nights because I was coughing every night, and it was just ridiculous. So, but I'm feeling a little bit better today. I've just been coughing like a nut job. So, but I'm on board with what Jake is saying. If it can't be proven 100%, and it sounds a little bit too crazy or something that I haven't seen, all I can say is maybe it's possible, but I can't back it yet. I can't back it until
right. And when it comes to someone else's testimony, you have to rely on the fruit of that person as well. I will say, John, too, I'll mention one thing that Josh Peck actually turned me on to. It's called Sumbacal, Sumbocal, I believe it is. And it's an elderberry extract. It's basically all natural stuff with some zinc and stuff in it. But man, when I got my cold a couple weeks ago, he said, take this. We took it for 3 days. Man, my cold was gone so fast. I'm still dealing with a cough and stuff, but it is amazing. It costs $15. You can get it at Walgreens. But for people out there during flu season that are struggling, Sumbacal is amazing. I'm a true believer. I wasn't sure, but Josh told me, hey, try this. It's going to work. And man, I'm telling you, it really does work. So there's that little bit of information. I don't know if you'd ever heard of it.
You call it again? Sorry.
Sumbacal, S-U-M-B. Here, let me look it up.
Mucinex type stuff.
No, it's an elderberry.
Oh, elderberry. Yeah, I've definitely. Elderberry is one. I'm all about.
There's a prepper that basically It's Sambucol, Sambucol, and it's basically an elderberry cold and flu type remedy, and you can get it in basically you can get it in tablet format, gummy format, or the liquid, and it really works. It knocked it out so fast. I've never gotten over a cold that fast.
We've got some elderberry in the cabinet right now because we use it for
really
things. Yeah, so I've tried a little bit, and like I said, I'm all about natural remedies if I can keep to it. I haven't been sick in such a long time. I rarely get sick. I think it's been several years since I've actually. This is the sickest I've been in several years, and I wouldn't say that I'm. Other than coughing, I don't feel that bad. I feel pretty great. Other than coughing my lungs out all the time and staying up all night doing it, I feel pretty fantastic. So
I just got this news feed in from Josh. This just came across the wire. He said Ray Gano is the one that talks about it. He did a sharpening report years ago with Ray Gano. He's the prepper that he talked to that talks about this stuff. And man, it is amazing. If I was going to sell a product, it would be Sambucol. If I could sell it, I would, because I'm that sold. I'm going to stock up. He's like, we buy several sets. You know, he said, whatever they have on the shelf, we'll buy it before the winter season hits. It's exactly what I'm doing. So what do you have, John? You have something elderberry on the shelf?
I got all kinds of crazy stuff like I'm trying. So, you know, I've got, like, I feel great other than the congestion, like I said, but for this is for me when I'm coughing like crazy. I put lemon juice, I want to say cayenne peppers, some kind of peppers. I can't remember right now off the top of my head. Honey, a little bit of peppermint, and ginger, and I mix it together, and I heat it over a stove to where it mixes together properly. Tastes not so good, but it helps. I mean, it keeps me from, like, if I drink about that much of this stuff before I go to bed, I'm good through the night. I'm not coughing, and I don't have that weird, like, you know, groggy feeling all night. Elderberry, I haven't really tried yet, but I know it's good for it. I've got a whole bottle of elderberry in because we use it to cook with sometimes. We use it and all that.
I'll share a funny story with you. So I'm sitting next to Josh Peck. He's working in the room next to me, and I'm working on some stuff. And I called to ask about this mysterious product that he's mentioned, Sambucol. And so I called the Walgreens a few towns over, and I asked them, do you have this stuff called Sambucol? It's made of elderberries. And she's like, well, let me see if I've got that. And she comes back and says, yes, we have it in a gummy format, all this. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. I said, because it's made of elderberries. And this is what the gummy bears used to take. Are you familiar with the gummy berry juice? And she just like nonchalantly is just like, I guess so. And so basically, I just did this whole thing. I was like, well, I would like to take the Sambucol, but I don't want to bounce here and there and everywhere. I just want to take it. And she doesn't know. Apparently, she didn't know who the gummy bears were. But when she finally came back with it, I said, is it made in the Black Forest of Germany? And she's like, I'm not sure. I'm like, because that's where the gummy bears live. And anyways, I just thought it was hilarious.
Your humor, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, there's no way to tell if you're joking because you're just so, like,
yeah. With it. And I was being so serious about it, and she's just like, she doesn't know what to think. But man, it was so funny because that came to me instantly when I heard elderberry. For whatever reason, it just took me back to the gummy berries and the gummy berry juice, and I'm like, it was real all along, bounce here and there and everywhere. But anyway, so this show is taking an interesting turn. It's 11 o'clock, guys. We have gone into overdrive for an hour.
That's what happens when you bring me on, Jake. It's going to go.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to have you back, John, where we have a few topics that we talk about. But, man, I think we could go round and round all night on so many interesting topics, you know, plus what the viewers' questions. They throw some interesting stuff into the mix, like the white horse vision and all that stuff. But okay, John, let's someone has one more thing they want us to talk about. I'm not as familiar with this. I'll let you speak to it. Let's just address this real quick. They basically wanted us to talk about the U.S. Russia Syria issue.
Yeah.
You're probably a little more familiar with it than me. I'm familiar with some of the things going on, but go ahead and elaborate, man.
I'm familiar with this in from two different mindsets, from the Russian mindset and from the U.S. mindset. I have contacts in Russia. I have friends. I actually, and I wouldn't call them friends. Let's say contacts. Okay, one of the guys that's the political scientist for Putin. He's one of the highest advisors when it comes to war, military tactics, and all these different things from a spiritual level. He's literally the think tank. Okay, he's one part of the think tank for war. His propaganda, which I call it propaganda because I have no way of knowing if he's being legitimately honest when he tells me this. He believes, and they believe, that America is funding ISIS. ISIS is being funded by America, and they are funding Assad, Assad is the actual government's military in Syria, which Syria is basically Russia at this point. So they're trying to control that area. Their accusations is that we are funding ISIS to go up against Assad when they're trying to take that area and make it a normal area. They're trying to take that area, make it normal, keep it from being completely nuts, and which ISIS is making it nuts. They're the rebels. Our side says we're not doing that, says we're fighting ISIS. So you have the two conflicts there on ideas. What is true, what is not, I don't know. But I can tell you that's what they believe. Recently, missiles were sent over to bomb some Assad in Syria. We had a treaty with Russia. That wasn't supposed to happen. It happened anyway. Russia blames us. We blame Russia, which obviously, depending on who you go by, if you go by Russia's idea of who is backing ISIS, then America probably did do it. If you go by Russia's idea, or America's idea, then Russia probably did do it. But then there's the whole idea of like, well, maybe they did it just to cause a war. Who knows? But that's what's going on with Syria and Russia. Russia has also, I was supposed to have an interview with him, okay, not too long ago, and during the time they were preparing for war. Literally, that's the word I got from his person that sets up the interviews. They're preparing for war. Next thing I hear, millions of Russians are going into bunkers preparing for nuclear war. It's no surprise that Russia and U.S. are not, bedfellows. At least that's what we're led to believe via media, via these people. Excuse me. Also, we look at the idea, and of course this was explained to me as well, the idea that if Hillary wins, there's no doubt Russia's going to war with us. They're going to war with us like that. Boom. That's the whole propaganda behind it. That's what they're telling us. If Hillary wins, war, nuclear war, big time. Boom. If Trump wins, we have a chance to extend it. That's what they're telling me. Whether or not it's true or not, like I said, I'm only human. I can't tell you 100%. I don't know everything, but this is coming from both different sides, both different angles. If you look at their media, you look at the way they line out things versus the way we line out things, it's two polar opposites. So that tells you that not everything you hear is going to be true, depending on which side you want to believe. But that's the whole idea behind it. Syria is basically part of Russia right now anyway. I mean, they're basically part of it.
We're basically fighting the Russians with ISIS in Syria through basically proxy war
according to Russia, that's what's happening. Yes.
Interesting. Well, and one thing I will mention that I find rather interesting is Trump has appeared to be kind of friendly towards Russia. And I'm not saying that is official stance, but he's obviously had communications with some of their people, Putin and whatnot. And Russia really likes Trump because he's not a New World Order guy. They really hate the New World Order from the standpoint that they don't want to be part of this regime. The old days of the USSR, they're still kind of entrenched in that and wanting to bring that back to life from their perspective of being in control and not a New World Order organization. And so Russia is they're kind of a wild card, if you will, from the standpoint that they don't want to get in line with everybody else in the New World Order scheme of things. What's your comment on that, man?
That's what we're led to believe. I mean, that's all I can really say. And you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, what it looks like from all angles. But then again, I'm always at the point to where I can't hardly believe it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'm not as familiar with the topic, but I will tell you this. Derek Gilbert from View from the Bunker. He's got various things going on, man. He talks about this stuff on a daily basis. He would be an excellent person to have on to have a discussion on this very topic, man, because he is following very closely what's going on over there. He has almost daily updates going with what is going on in Turkey and Syria and all these places. Yes, Derek Gilbert, he's the guy. You can tune in and watch him. He's got stuff on View from the Bunker, but he's also the analyst and news anchor for Skywatch TV. But he's got a daily out there, and Derek is amazing. He's very professional. He's great at what he does. So
much more professional. Oh, but at the same, no, but it's true. I mean, he does a great job on it. But at the same time, his research on point for what you were told. But like I said, you know, I don't know what to believe. I mean, I don't know if I mean, I know, like I said, I know that's what they're saying. I know that's what the information we can gather. Yeah, we can gather all that information. It seems 100% like this makes sense. This is the commentary. It's kind of like watching a soap opera, though, in my opinion. Like you can commentary like, well, I think Joey's gonna kill Joanne next episode. Yeah, maybe so, but it's still all written and played, you know, and I don't know if that's the way it is. Weird, man. I would have never looked at Russian media versus American media were this situation not presented in front of me. Man, I mean, if I had to guess, and if you're telling me like guess and say, what do you think? I think that they're preparing the people in general for war. War is going to happen. And they're just letting us know. And
I will share one thing with you that I find very interesting. I had Stan Johnson from the Prophecy Club on my show a year ago, and a lot of people frown at whatever. I don't care. What I look at is the person's, you know, the fruit in their life, whatever they got going on. But one of his mentors was a guy named Dmitry Duduman, who came from Russia, that basically had this supernatural type vision, right? And an angel of the Lord basically told him that he was called to come to the United States and warn America that they will be destroyed in one day, that Russia would basically attack from the coastline with several other countries together. And he had this big, huge vision of basically this end time like war in America that Dmitry Duduman has since passed, but many of the other things he said in regards to personal interpretation of things that he had told Stan and other people that God had revealed were accurate. And so,
well, man,
I just think
exactly with the dream that I had, and I believe I've told you about it. But the dream,
Dmitry Duduman is his name. I'll get you the spelling. Go ahead, John.
What I was saying is I had a dream or a vision. It was hard to say, but this is one of the ones I wrote down. I've only written down 5 in my whole life. This is one of the ones I wrote down.
Let's talk about it.
Well, I've talked about it on several shows, but I'll talk about it again because it's really important for me to get it out there just in case. I'm not claiming to be Elijah. I'm not claiming to be anybody like that.
Right.
A guy that had a dream that really frightened me. I was felt like I should write it down, and I felt like I should tell people about it. But I had this dream. When I woke up from it, I was sweating. In the dream, I'm standing there. And next thing, and it's hard to say how I knew this in that dream because I just knew it. Like I was just there and I could see it all happening. At the same time, I could just see everywhere at the same. It's really weird. I can't hardly explain it other than I could see it all. But around the U.S. coast, Russian submarines were surrounding the U.S. coast. And everybody was frightened. There was nothing we could do. Our troops were all deployed somewhere else. We didn't have enough people to do anything. There were so many of them. It was ridiculous. They had troops in our own country that they had come over from Mexico and through Canada, through the borders. They'd come in. They'd already been there set up for a long period of time. So their troops were all over the place in America. Their whole borders were surrounded by submarines, and then Chinese as well. China was in it as well.
Wow.
And so it was scary. So like there was no doubt in my mind in this dream that we were done for. Like that.
You need to get in touch with Stan Johnson from the Prophecy Club. I can put you in touch with him because he literally said verbatim, he said that one of the things that Dmitry Duduman said in his vision, he said that America would be too tied up with other foreign wars to be able to deal with the issue, and that this country would attack us while we were militarily spread too thin. basically we would not be able to deal with the situation. I mean, what you are describing is lining up exactly with what this guy was saying, who has been basically talking about this prophecy for years and years and years. And in his situation, it was a literal vision. You're talking about a dream, but man, they are. You need to talk with Stan. Seriously, it'll blow your mind.
I've never heard that before. Like, I've never heard this guy's vision. But at the same time, it doesn't surprise me. I'm telling you, this dream, I don't have many I write down. You know that, Jake. I've told you about a lot.
Yeah.
There's only a few that I've written down and that I've actually just, thought there's something to it. And that was one of them. And scary thought, but you're right. I mean, we're spread thin already. I mean, there's nothing. And that's what I was saying before when we talk about, can they come and take everybody's guns? Our country wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, they might be able to use the police force to do it if the police force would, but they're not.
But if the military was weak enough, all they would have, if they don't have to deal with the military and the civilian population, and they could take care of enough of the civilian population through EMP or whatever, I mean, theoretically it would be possible, man, if we're weak enough. And honestly, man, the mentality of a lot of America has shifted over the past decade or 2 decades with the anti-gun propaganda. Many of the liberals are buying into this. And again, I'm not slamming liberals, but I'm just saying that programming is why they call it on television, because that's what it is. It's programming, programming you to think a certain way. And one of the pieces of propaganda that's been pushed through is to change your viewpoint on the right to bear arms, so that at some point they can disarm the American people. I truly believe that.
And you also use UN troops. I mean, we're highly invested in the UN as well. So I mean,
well, and again, I don't remember the specifics. He said, let me go ahead and expound a little bit. Well, that's okay. We'll talk about it another time, but I will send you the information, John, on Dimitri Duduman, and you got to have Stan Johnson on to talk about this, because he will just tell you exactly what Dimitri Duduman said.
I'd love to. I'm a big Prophecy Club fan. I mean, I hadn't even heard them until a few years ago. This is way past their, the time that they were in, but I've listened to so many different testimonies and so many different studies on the Prophecy Club, man. I don't know much about the guy other than he was the Prophecy Club guy, but I'm always, I've had so many different people on, man.
Yeah.
And my audience, knows to no matter who I have on, to study it out and see whether, we don't just follow after anybody just because of whatever, but I'd still love to have them. I'd love it.
I understand. Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, that's official. An hour and 22 minutes over. I'm not used to these long shows, John. I'm a little bit tired. You've worn me out a little bit, man.
I'm tired too, man. But yeah, it's been good. It went by really fast. I didn't realize what time it was, so I looked down.
We got to do this again, man. This has been so much fun. I can come on Now You See TV, but man, we got to have you back with some other guests, because it is just a good time. So many things to talk about, guys. I want to thank everybody out there in the chat for joining us tonight. Shebon, Val, Brian, Allison, Cott. A lot of people have since departed since earlier. Sweet Pea. I mean, so many people I'm seeing, and Brent, I see him on a regular basis. Thank you guys so much for participating tonight and joining us with the Sharpening Report family and the Now You See TV family. And it's just been a great opportunity. But also, guys, I just want to say I've got a program called Seek the Number 4 Truth. So Seek for Truth on YouTube. You can go there. You can go to seek4truth.org. I've got some stuff there, but please subscribe and like and share and all that great stuff, guys. This is we're doing this to spread the gospel because we love talking about it, but it also helps us. So we appreciate your support and just viewing. It doesn't cost you any money to view, But anyways, thanks again for joining me, John. And man, it has been awesome. And until next time, guys, this has been the Sharpening Report. This is Jake Rahutsky in for Josh Peck. I'm all out of town all next week traveling with Josh, but James will be in the house with a few interviews that he's got coming up, James DeWitt. So stay tuned for that. He'll keep you a little bit preoccupied while we're gone. And then the week after, I should be back, and we'll have some shows lined up at that point. But thank you, guys. God bless you. Until next time, This has been Seek for Truth, and I'm here with John from Now You See TV.
See you guys later.
All right. God bless.